in 1970. 1970 was a pivotal year for me because at the beginning of the year, in February, I went to Cuba for 2 months. There was a group called the Venceremos Brigade, which organized groups of mainly young people at the time to go down to Cuba to work in support of the Cuban Revolution. So I was on the second one, which was a huge one. It was the biggest ever, and they never had one that big again because it was way too unwieldy. There were about 700 people on it. But we got on a bus downtown in front of the Westin, and for some reason they had worked up this scheme that we were supposed to be pretending we were going on a ski trip. And there was this odd mix of people from my age, which was 17 at the time, on up to people in their 30s and 40s. None of us had any ski equipment. And when we were waiting on the sidewalk getting ready to get on the bus, somebody looked, there was a parking garage at the other end of the block, and on about the 4th floor you could see somebody leaning out the window taking pictures of all of us. And in Chicago, they said we had to change buses. There was something mechanically wrong with the bus, and we waited for about an hour and proceeded to get right back on the same bus. And as we were getting on, there was a guy in a Navy uniform standing 10 feet away, snapping a picture of each individual as they got on the bus. But anyway, I went to Cuba, and on the trip over, I grew up arguing and discussing politics with my parents' friends and acquaintances who were primarily liberals, not as left as I was, and I was used to that kind of discussion. On the bus, there were all these people who were active in SDS, who were, on a PhD track. They spent years reading and discussing, and they thought of themselves as much farther left and attacked the things that I believed in from a different direction, and I basically didn't have a clue how to answer them. This was totally new, and I felt, God, maybe they're right. Maybe this is, this is the wrong choice that I've made. What the hell am I doing? Now I'd think back to the people I knew and the work that they did and how much I respected that, but I still didn't have answers for these questions that people were asking me or accusing me. So anyway, down in Cuba, we cut cane for 6 weeks and then traveled around the country for 2 weeks. And in the camp, for the 6 weeks of it, I managed to connect. We had a party caucus, and I ran into somebody else who had a button for the founding of a Marxist-Leninist youth organization, which was this. Anyway, and I said, I'm in that. So she said, oh, good, we're having a caucus meeting tomorrow night. You should come. And I was like, ah. So, and later in the camp, we had different groups put on informational evenings. They were trying to not have people do heavy recruiting pitches, but people wanted to, talk about their groups, and there were a huge range of them. So we had an evening, and there were 30-some people in our caucus, and we decided that everybody would answer the questions and participate, and I think everybody did except me. But I dare say I learned more than anybody else that night, because all the questions that I'd been confronted with on the bus across got asked that night, and people had the answers. So I was sitting there like a sponge, soaking it up. And that prepared me for later that year. In the fall of that year, I went to a 2-month party school in New York. And again, I was like a sponge. I was just 18 and soaking it all up. And having a blast. And I've been a political junkie ever since.